Hello and welcome back to the Strug. Like life, like this podcast, it's real. The Strug is real. My name is May, aka May B. I'm a tattoo artist, tattoo apprentice, and the tattoo artist Cris Gherman. And this is my podcast where I talk about all different types of things pertaining to art, pertaining to psychology, pertaining to life, my life, everything and anything. This podcast today, I'm very excited about because today's topic is about books, and not just books physically, but audiobooks, physical books, and the benefits of reading. And even though I feel like this could sound like a boring topic, I promise you it's not. I promise you, hopefully you leave this podcast with the benefits of reading and how maybe it can improve your life. I know it improved my life dramatically. And I promise you it won't be boring. Like, it really is an interesting topic to discuss. I hope you guys enjoy it. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. A little bit about my past history, I guess, about reading in general is I was always a big reader as a kid. My favorite thing in school was to go to the library when we would go. I moved around a lot as a kid, and I remember there was two schools specifically where we would go to the library. I don't know if it was once a week or something, and we would have a reading time in the library, and the librarian would come and read to us, and it was my favorite fucking time. And it wasn't even a class. It was literally just for our enjoyment, and I loved it, and I definitely connect that to how I feel about books now. And then over the years, as I got busy, as I was in high school and then out of high school, life got a lot more hectic, and I just didn't even think about reading. I definitely lost that enjoyment, and I lost just any want to read. Like most people, I feel like, who don't read now. Back then, I did feel like it was too much of a hassle. I'm like, I have to. The idea of picking up a book and reading it for some reason just sounded like a task, and I feel like people who don't read now probably feel that way. So hopefully you leave this podcast with maybe a changed mind, but that's just a little bit about my past of reading. And what changed it was when I moved to Miami. My life is so crazy and so hectic, and especially in Miami it is. I'm not in there right now, but I am going back so I can remember how I felt in Miami. And it's just, I was working nonstop, and I definitely learned a lot about myself just being out on my own and living 24/7, just working and not really doing anything else. And I realized that I definitely suffer from anxiety, and down there I really had no way to release it, nothing to escape to when I was living the crazy life. And even now, where I am right now, it's hard to escape your reality sometimes. And in Miami, the first reason I got back into reading was because of Chris. He truly believes in listening to audiobooks while you're tattooing, and he feels like it's less of a distraction as music, because most tattoo artists and most tattoo studios, there's music fucking blaring, and most of the time it's not even good music. If you think about the traditional tattoo studio, you probably think of early 2000s, is heavy metal everywhere, loud as shit, not comforting for anybody there, but it just fits the vibe, I guess, of a tattoo artist. It did anyway back in the day, and that's not relaxing. That's not good for the artist either. So Chris switched to audiobooks a long time ago, and he feels like it's a good method to relax yourself while you're working. If you're listening to a good, rich, and soothing voice, and it has a story, like you're listening to someone tell a story, and I'll show you the statistics that I have that actually validate that idea. It lowers your stress levels, and it allows you just to be calm and neutral. And especially while you're tattooing, it's very critical to have a steady hand. It's very critical to be in the right mindset. And if you're listening to a story that's developing or enveloping, and and the voice is critical with audiobooks. So it has to be like a very good, soothing. I prefer a man's voice. I don't know why. Me and Chris both agree. When it's a woman's voice and it's too high pitched, it makes you more stressed. So I don't know if that's like fucked up to say, but when you're listening to an audiobook, I highly recommend looking for voices that you like, and that way you'll enjoy it and get the most out of it. Yeah, that's the main reason I started listening to books. And then after that, I wanted more. I was like, you know what, I really do enjoy listening to storytelling, and I did grow up reading a lot, so I'm just gonna get back into it. And ever since then, my stress levels have been, obviously I still have stress, but it definitely has decreased. And I'm definitely going to utilize reading books when I go back down to Miami, just because I know myself. I know I'm going to stress the fuck out of myself and work myself to the ground, and having that as a tool to escape my reality and just be peaceful for a little bit, I think it'll help a lot. Going back to when I mentioned that I have a statistic to share about stress and reading, in the arts.gov or www.arts.gov, they did a study back in 2009, so I feel like it still applies. Even though it was a little bit of years ago, I would say it's still, the statistic is valid. They said that testing found that reading reduced stress levels by 68%, making it more effective means of relaxation than taking a walk, drinking a cup of tea, or playing video games. And not only can it help you reduce stress when you have like leisure time, like when you're about to go to sleep, or you wake up in the morning or anything like that, where you have like true time to read, I would try to implement it in your work if you can. Like with me tattooing, it definitely helps a lot, just because when I realize about myself that I tend to have high stress levels when I'm tattooing, that's the opposite of what I want and the opposite of what I need. So to get out of my own head and not think about the daily stresses of my life, listening to audiobooks really does help me. Music sometimes helps me, but specifically for tattooing when I'm working, I don't know what it is about having a person read to me. It really does allow me to not be in my own head, because you're fully focused, like subconsciously, because you're fully focused on the tattooing part, but then subconsciously, that's when the shit in your life starts to creep in, and then you don't want that to dictate your work. So having a voice that is like clouding your own thinking, to me, helps a lot. And mentioning stress and relaxation, I don't want you to get the impression that you have to listen to like a boring ass book. Please don't do that. I feel like that's the first way to like not love reading and not really enjoy it, is if you pick a book that you think you should read. Like you really need to pick a book that interests you. And I can't stress that enough. I will not stop saying that in this podcast. You can't stress it enough. Really pick a book that you want, like you could visualize in your head. Pick a book that you could see like being a movie, and then I promise you'll enjoy it. So I don't want you to have to think that you have to pick out books that are calming or anything to have it be calming, because it's really the action that makes it a calming thing. It has really nothing to do with the topic, because you could be reading or listening to like a thrasher ass horror film style book, but it still relaxes you for some reason. So don't think that you have to listen to any type of book to be calm while reading it and reduce your stress levels. Just really pick out something that you are really interested in. And circling back to when I was in Miami, I didn't have any way to escape my own reality. Like I felt like I was trapped in the chaoticness. I had nothing to just distract me and let me be somewhere that I wasn't. You know, I was in a whole new area. You know, I had friends, but not anybody I'm super close to. No places I really wanted to go, because Miami, if you don't know, is a very nightlife city. Like it's clubs, it's, you know, strip clubs. It's a very that. So, you know, that's fun for me every now and then, but I don't want that all the time, and I need something to allow me to just not be there and just relax. Think about something that is not my own fucked up life, you know? And that's what I truly love about books. Like, when your life is overwhelming and you just need to be somewhere that you're not right now, and you don't have the money to like take a trip or, you know, do anything that's outrageously expensive, I feel like books allow you to do that. It allows you to really immerse yourself into the character's mindset. It allows you to be in a mythical or a real destination. If you're a reader that visualizes everything like I am a reader that fully pictures everything I'm reading. Unless it's a really fucked up, like a really bad book, I can fully see like a whole movie playing in my head while I'm reading it. And that action allows me to be somewhere I'm not in the moment. Like, I'm fully there. I'm fully inside of this book right now. It feels like you're traveling somewhere. And that's like, when you need somewhere or you need something to allow you to escape, that's literally perfect. It really doesn't cost that much. Like, books can range from like $12 to like $32 per book, and then audiobooks, that it depends on if you get a membership or not, which you don't have to have one. I'm pretty sure there's multiple free book apps to like get you to start, and then if you like them, you can always get a membership with, this is not sponsored, I wish it was, but you can get Audible, you can get Apple Books. There's multiple types, and those you can pay per book, and I don't know the prices of those, or you can get a membership. That's really just up to you. If that sounds like a lot, if you're like, nah, like I don't want to pay for that, I would really suggest swapping it out for something that you already have. Like, if you're like, you know what, I really don't use my Hulu, I would swap that out for an Audible. If you are like, I really don't use this, I really don't use that, like for subscriptions, because I wouldn't swap out anything else. If you're trying to get a membership, I would just swap out something that you don't really use to pay for it, if you want that. I want to talk about why I personally think people today don't read as much. And they're both kind of obvious, but I do want to bring them up. One being that the rise of like social media. A lot of people just tend to use their phones just because it's easy access. Like, you can scroll through TikTok, you can scroll through YouTube, Instagram, and that can be your way to escape your life. But I don't think that reduces stress levels literally at all. I think, if anything, it makes you more stressed because you're looking at bullshit and it doesn't enrich you in any way. Like, books really do, you get something out of it after you read it, and I'll talk about that a little later. But phones don't do that. If anything, if I'm scrolling through all of that, I become more stressed and high anxiety just because I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'm looking at people who are most of the time fake living this life. Or you're looking at hacks or anything, and then you leave your phone. You can't tell me that you feel less stressed or like you got something out of it and you learned, depending on what you're looking at. But if you're like mindlessly scrolling, that's different from like researching. But if you're mindlessly scrolling, you can't tell me that you learned or you feel better after, scrolling through TikTok, right? You might get a good chuckle, but those are very far and few. And the second point as to why I feel people don't read as much is that I feel if you're not a reader in the beginning, like you haven't really been one in your entire life, I think the idea of like searching for a book and holding it and like physically reading something like with your hands, like you're holding a book, I feel like it can sound like a task, because it did for me when I got out of reading and then I started to pick up on it again. The even thought of it, I was like, dude, like I have to go to the fucking bookstore, I have to look for a story that I like. The last thing, if you're really like tired, you're like, oh, I don't want to do that, then I have to really pay attention, because books really you do have to have your attention on the book. So that's why I feel like it does allow you to escape and reduce stress. But if you're in a mindset of like you just want to relax, that can sound a little daunting. So I do get it. And I think also because of the rise of social media, people have shorter attention spans out the ass. So you're like, I don't have enough for this story right now. But if that is you, if that applies to you, I would highly suggest starting with audiobooks, just because that takes away a lot of the action when you are getting into reading. Like, you don't have to search for a physical book. You don't have to go to a bookstore. you can have that on your phone and you can just listen to it. And you can still get the same type of feeling when listening to an audiobook. And they tend to go a lot faster as well. Like, audiobooks can range from like 3 hours long to like 24 hours long, but I promise you the 24 goes by really fucking fast, especially if you're doing it, listening to it while working or in your bed or anything. It goes by pretty quickly. So if that does apply to you, I would start with audiobooks, and then if you want something more, then you would try physical books. I don't want to like have you jump into it to where it sounds like a task too fast. So start with what you're comfortable with, and then I would escalate to physical books, because personally I prefer physical books on my leisure time. When I'm working, obviously I can't like read a physical book, but if I had to choose between the two, I would 100% choose just actual books. I like to create everything in my own head. I want to create the characters. I want to create the voices, because sometimes when I'm reading, these people have accents, and if that don't match the person who's speaking, it's not going to work. So I prefer that. And I actually do like holding books and flipping the page and rereading something if I'm like, what the fuck just happened? Or what did he say? What did she say? I like that. Again, it just depends on who you are. And if physical books sound like a good time to you, I would choose that first. You never know. And I mentioned this a little bit before, that you have to have like your undivided attention when you're reading a physical book. Not necessarily when you're listening to an audiobook. You can do that subconsciously. But when you're reading a physical book, you have to have your undivided attention. And to me, books really do broaden your mind. Like, they make you think. Like, you're forced to use your brain when you're doing it. And that could sound like a job, but I promise you it's not. If anything, it's like a mystery, especially depending on what type of story you're reading. It just makes you think about everything. You have to think about, scenarios of what's going to happen next. What do you think this character is going to do next, or anything like that? Or what the fuck does this word mean? Because it's a big ass word and I don't know that. So that will definitely makes you think, and because of that, it makes you smarter. There's a statistic that I found, and I feel like most people, if you are not turned on by reading yet, I think this will turn you on to it. From www.medium.com, there is a statistic that they found, or percentage that they found, that states, quote, those who read 7 or more books per year are more than 122% more likely to be millionaires, end quote. And who doesn't want to be a millionaire, So I 100% believe that is fucking true. Like, thank you. I want to be a millionaire, So reading, because it makes you think so much and it makes you learn a lot, and it really does give you introspection. Like, after I read a book, I end up like applying it to myself in my life. I'm like, damn, or I'm just like this character, or that's a good outlook on life, or anything like that. It does apply. You end up applying it to yourself, and you learn a lot through them. It doesn't matter what the topic is. It could be a dumbass fucking comedy book, but you still are gonna get something out of it, like I promise. Again, who doesn't want to be a millionaire? And that's why I want to stress that it is really critical to get a book that interests you to get something out of it. If you don't like reading Shakespeare, or you don't like reading Pride and Prejudice, or like a classic book, then don't pick it up. You're not going to get anything out of it. You're going to feel like it's a homework, and you're not going to like it. So really pick up a book that you like. I do have a few recommendations for y'all. I love these books so much, and I think that many people will like it. Even though they're long, they're so fucking good. And it's by my main man, Stephen King. I love Stephen King, and I didn't realize how much until I started reading his books. The first book I read of him was actually not even a book. It was almost like an autobiography about how he writes, like his writing style. And I read that back in like 11th grade, and I for some reason loved it, even though it was not even a story. He talked a little bit about his life, but he really just talked about how he writes, how he approaches writing. But I started liking his writing then. And then I watched It, Not the original, because that one's creepy. That one's too fucking weird for me. The newer one, not the second one. The second one I will say was ass. But the first one with the little kid from Stranger Things, if you know, you know. It's the one with what's his name? Bill Skarsgård, the one who plays It. I really got into Stephen King after that. Then I watched The Shining and I was like, I really like Stephen King. And then I read one of my favorite books of all time. I've listened to this. I want to get the physical book, but I listened to it first on audio. And it's titled Fairy Tale by Stephen King. And it is so fucking good. I hope that you pick it up because it is so... I can't even stress it enough, but I want to give a little synopsis, or my own synopsis, of what the story's about. The main character's name is Charlie Reed, and he's a high school jock, but he's like a nice jock. He's not like a douchey one. You know, he gets good grades, good at sports, you know, like all around American, the true American dream of like a high school fucking dude, right? And he has an alcoholic father, or a previous alcoholic father, because he ends up taking AA. His mom died when he was a kid, and that's what made his dad drink. He makes this promise to God, he thinks, and it's not a religious book really at all, like literally at all, but he said that he made this promise when he was a kid, and then right after his dad ended up joining AA, so he concluded it to it being because he promised that to God. But he doesn't, you could tell he's like, I understand that it is dumb and it sounds like a kid wish, but I do uphold it in my own life. Like, I try my hardest in my life to uphold the promise that I made. And he just tries to be a better person for the sake of his dad, really. If you know, like, when you boil down to it, he ends up meeting this old or crotchety man. The first thing I thought of when I read this character was, if you've seen the movie Haunted House, Mr. Nevercracker, he is literally him. A bitter old man, but you love him at the same time. Or Danny DeVito, you know, you love him. He's a grouchy man, but you love him. He ends up helping him because he heard his dog Radar, love Radar. She is a German Shepherd. She's older too, and so is the old man, Mr. B. He ends up hearing the dog barking, and he ends up saving him, pretty much saving his life, because he fell off his ladder. He ends up having to go to the hospital, and what happens is that he takes care of his dog while he's in the hospital. And then Charlie is getting suspicious, and he really helps him because he's trying to be a good person. That was his main reason. He's like, I need to uphold my promise that I made, so I want to help this old man. And he really is just that he is a good kid, but he's a very humble one. He doesn't want to take any credit for anything when it comes to doing good deeds. So in his head, it doesn't seem like that. But he ends up helping this old man, and then this old man has a history. He has this bucket of gold pellets inside of his safe, and he's like, what the fuck? I won't talk about the whole story because I could. He ends up dying, but before he dies, he's like, look, the reason I have all this gold is because in my shed behind my house, there is a hole, and if you go into it, it basically takes you into this new realm. There's a land, I forgot what the land is called, but it's you're literally entering a whole new world, and they have gold there. That's like their main money source, like, you know, all the rich people, all the rich folk. He's like, I am not as old as you think I am. I actually am, you know, like 100 and something. And he's like, because there's this thing inside the land that you can stand on and spin, and it can decrease the years on your life. So he went in when he was like 30, and he turned back the clock. Like, he made himself younger, I think, by like 20 years. And then he went back into our world and lived out his life as a different person. He tells him that because he's like, if you want to save my dog, I know you bond with her, like, I know you love her, but she is getting sick, she is dying, so if you do want to save her, you're gonna have to take her to that place that I went to inside the land and make her young again. So because Charlie's like, I'm not letting this fucking dog die, this is my baby, I'm saving her. So he goes into the land, and then he meets a bunch of different characters. He learns that this land is definitely dying, like there's some type of curse on the land that is making everybody sick and making everybody deformed, and he's like, what the fuck is going on? And then there's giants involved, fucked up giants. Like, it is a Stephen King book, so it has a gruesome like feel to it, and the what I would compare it to is like a Grimm Brothers tale. If you know, like, the original stories of like Cinderella and Snow White and all of that, they're really fucking gruesome as shit, like cutting off feet and to fit the slipper. Like, it's like that. It's mythical, but it's still a Stephen King book. I won't spill anything else about the story because you really need to read it or listen to it. But I love that book so. I've listened to it multiple times. It is so good to me. The voices in that book for the audio is so good. I don't know what it is about the story that I love. Like, it's funny. The characters are funny. The trek of going on a quest basically is really intriguing to me. And I was never into fairy tale books. I'm not a mythical bitch. I like, if anything, I really like mystery books. I like thrillers. And that's pretty much where I fall into. Like, I'm really not into romance books. There can be romance elements in a book, but if it's like a full-on, like, you know, lovers, da-da-da-da-da, I get so bored. I'm like, no, this is not for me. Or if it's like a book where it like is all witches and spells, it sounds cool, but I always get bored. So the fact that I like this book that much is so crazy to me, but I love it. And you need to read it. So I highly recommend that one. And the second one, also by Stephen King. I am currently reading it, so I don't know what is the ending. But this book is very long. The title of this book is 11/22/63. And if you don't know what that pertains to, it is the day JFK was assassinated. This in 1963. And this book is like almost 1,000 pages, dude. But it is so good. I've had the want to challenge myself and read a long ass book. So that's part of the reason why I picked this up. But also I knew that because it was Stephen King, I knew that I would love it. And this book still is going by so fucking fast, even though it's 1,000 fucking pages. But it's so good. Like, I promise you, it's worth it. Because I've tried to read books before that are long as shit, but they're so boring. And you can tell these are not good authors because they're so wordy and they're describing shit that does not matter to make it long. Like, you can tell when a book is like that. But Stephen King writes everything with fucking purpose, and it does not feel long, I promise you. But this story is about a character named Jake, and he's an English teacher. He teaches night school, but that's just who he is. And there's this old diner in the town, and a lot of Stephen King's books are set in Maine or New Hampshire just because that's where he's from. So it's this small town in Maine, and he ends up talking to this diner guy, like an old man who owns a diner. He sells cheap ass burgers, like $1 burgers, and they're really fucking good and real meat. So he's like, there's like a bunch of skepticism in the town about it, but they don't really know each other. Like, he's just seen him in the diner and that's it. I don't think they had any friendship. He ends up getting a call from the old man, and he's like, look, he calls him over. He's aged exponentially, but you end up learning that he has cancer. He's dying, but he has something to tell old Jake. So he's like, okay, so if you go behind his pantry, and I realized with this story that Stephen King loves this idea of a story of like a hole in the wall or something and then entering a new world, because that was similar to fairy tale. But this one is like time traveling. So he's like, look, behind this pantry, you step into the 50s. And he's like, excuse me? And he's like, yeah. So it's basically a portal to the 50s. But the very interesting thing about this book, you step back in time, but every time you go back, it's the same day. So it's always like something in 58. Like, it's the same thing every fucking time. And every time you go back to the past through this portal, you reset everything. So nobody remembers you when you travel back in time. And also, anything you did back in time previously gets erased. And that's very critical for the story. But he's like, This is, you step back in the 50s. And the whole reason I asked you here, I'm dying and I can't fulfill what I want to do. So I want you to do it. Only if you want to, but I want you to do it. If you go back in time and you stay there for 4 years, I want you to kill Lee Harvey Oswald. I want you to stop the assassination of JFK. And he gives all these reasons about why it should happen. You never know. But then Jack, he's like, but you don't know what that could do to the future. Like, yes, there's things that could happen that are positive for him living, but there is a butterfly effect. Like, little shit matters, and we're doing, like, little things you do could affect the present in the past. So stopping a whole ass assassination of the United States president sounds like a big ass fucking butterfly, and I'm a little scared to do that. And he's like, well, if that does happen when you come back to the future, as long as you don't like die in the past, like, they don't know if the portal's still gonna be there. Like, it's all a gamble. But he's like, if you end up making it back to the future and everything is more fucked up, all you have to do is step back in and everything's reset. So that does entice him, and he ends up doing it. I am like a third of the way through the book, and he's just committed. He did a trial to see if he was gonna do it, like a little butterfly effect, to see if how it would change, and he has made the decision to go back and stop Lee Harvey Oswald, and I'm so fucking excited. And the way he describes the 50s, dude, is so good. Like, you feel like you're there. Smoke everywhere, classic cars for the prices in the 50s get me. You don't even know, unless you are listening and you know, lived through the 50s. Everything was so fucking cheap, and it makes me cry in the inside, because a car, a literal like Mercedes, a convertible, was literally like $300 to $800. That makes me want to cry. Gas costs 19 cents a gallon. You know what? Just kill me now. Like, really? Are you joking? And that's in America. That's not even... Gas is $5 to $7 now. A car is a mortgage. I'm done. But that is the story of 11/22/63 by JFK by Stephen King. So those are my 2 recs for you. If you need some stories, or if you don't have any idea of what you want to read, those are 2 that I would highly recommend. And I also want to give you advice to listen to books. I would recommend listening to these, because I feel like physically reading these would be a little bit of a task, but they do really help. Listening to books that are like better help books or self-help books, I would highly recommend everybody listen to. It can be about stress, it can be about your life, it can be about business, a better entrepreneur, it could be about anything like that. I do recommend listening to, just because you do learn a lot out of it. It's literally like taking a class without paying to go to college. And I didn't go to fucking college, so this is my college when I listen to those books. And a recommendation that I have for those is I haven't listened to it yet, but I already know it's gonna be phenomenal. The book that is by Jordan Belfort. He is the story that Wolf of Wall Street is based on, and he was in the stock market. And so his book is basically giving people advice about how to be a better salesman and a businessman, and everything that he learned to get to the top where he was a millionaire, things that you can benefit from. Also telling like his own stories from Wall Street that are funny as fuck and crazy. And the reason I want to get the audio is because he narrates it. He's a narcissistic ass, and I would not expect anything less. But his voice is so thick Staten Island that it's so good. It's so good. So I want to get that one. I do recommend it. And getting books also about habits, about anything self-help, I do think you'll benefit a lot from. I would just recommend getting the audiobooks version of that. At least I do. I actually will listen to them, because buying one sounds a little bit like homework. And if you have that on in the background a few times, I think it'll subliminally and subconsciously get into your mind. You know, play it a few times and it'll sink in. You know, it's kind of like when you watch a commercial 5,000 times and you end up like listening to the jingle in your head without even thinking of it. I think it'll be a little bit like that. So that was today's podcast. I hope you guys got something out of it. And I hope you guys end up picking up a book or listening to audiobooks after this, just because I really do think it'll help you and benefit your life in multiple ways and more ways than one. Like, I think it'll reduce your stress if you have a stressful ass life. It'll allow you to escape your crazy or boring life if you have one. And you'll learn something from them. And you'll do a lot of introspection from them, which I think is critical to self-growth and improvement. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to follow me on all or any of my social medias, I am at MAABETANCOURT, May Betancourt on Instagram, also on TikTok. I have a YouTube that if you want to still listen to this podcast, you can listen to it on my YouTube channel. And I just have that up there for people who don't have Spotify or Anchor. So yeah, if you're listening to this podcast from YouTube, hello, thank you so much for listening. And yeah, and if you want to follow Cris Gherman, Instagram at Cris Gherman, How to Tattoo on Instagram, Stencilnator on Instagram, and 5,000 other things on TikTok and YouTube. So yeah, get a tattoo, read a book, do anything you enjoy. Have a good day.
Oh, thank you.